Hello and welcome to Free Talks Book Club. This month we are going to be reading Women. Short stories written by women from the perspective of women on the experience of being women. We're going to start this cycle by reading a short story by writer Alice Mundo called The Office. And it goes something like this. The Office by Alice Mundo. The solution to my life occurred to me one evening while I was ironing a shirt. It was simple but audacious. I went into the living room where my husband was watching television and I said, I think I ought to have an office. It sounded fantastic, even to me. What do I want an office for? I have a house. It is pleasant and roomy and has a view of the sea. It provides appropriate places for eating and sleeping and having baths and conversations with one's friends. Also, I have a garden. There is no lack of space. No. But here comes the disclosure, which is not easy for me. I am a writer. That does not sound right. Too presumptuous, phony, or at least unconvincing. Try again. I write. Is that better? I try to write. That makes it worse. Hypocritical humility. Well then, it doesn't matter. However I put it, the words create their space of silence, the delicate moment of exposure. But people are kind. The silence is quickly absorbed by the solicited of friendly voices, crying variously, "How wonderful!" and "Good for you!" and "Well, that is intriguing." "And what do you write?" they inquire with spirit. "Fiction," I reply, carrying my humiliation with facility, even a suggestion of flippancy, which was not always mine. And again, the perceptible circles of incredulity are softened by these tactful voices and can say only, "Ah." So this is what I want an office for, I said to my husband, to write in. I was at once aware that it sounded like a finicky requirement, a piece of rare self-indulgence. To write, as everyone knows, you need a typewriter, or at least a pencil, some paper, a table, and chair. I have all these things in a corner of my bedroom, but now I want an office as well. And I was not even sure that I was going to write in it. Maybe I would sit and stare at the wall. Even that prospect was not unpleasant to me. It was really the sound of the word office that I liked. Its sound of dignity and peace, and purpose and importance. But I did not mention this to my husband, so I launched instead into an explanation which went, as I remember, like this. A house is all right for a man to work in. He brings his work into the house, a place is prepared for it. The house rearranges itself as best it can around him. Everybody recognizes that his work exists. He is not expected to answer the telephone, to find things that are lost, to see why the children are crying or feed the cat. He can close his door. Imagine, I said, a mother closing her door and the children knowing she is behind it. The very thought of it is outrageous to them. A woman who sits staring into space, into a country that is not her husband's or her children's, is almost like an offense against nature. So a house is not the same for a woman. She is not someone who walks into the house to make use of it and will walk out again. She is the house. There is no separation possible. And this is true, though, as usual, when arguing for something I am afraid I do not deserve, I put it in too emphatic and emotional terms. At certain times, perhaps on long spring evenings, still rainy and sad, I have opened the windows and felt the house shrink back into wood and metal and those humble elements of which it is made, and the life in it subside, leaving me exposed, empty-handed, but feeling a fierce and lawless sense of freedom, of loneliness too violent and perfect for me now to bear. Go ahead, if you can find one cheap enough, is all my husband had to say to this. He is not like me. He does not really want explanations. That the heart of another person is a closed book is something you will hear him say frequently and without regret. Even then, I did not think it was something that could be accomplished. Perhaps deep down it seemed to me a very improper wish to be granted. I could almost more easily have wished for a mink coat, for a diamond necklace. These are things women do obtain. The children, learning of my plans, receive them with the most elegant skepticism and unconcern. Nevertheless, I went to the shopping center, which is 2 blocks from where I live. There, I had noticed for several months, and without thinking how they could be connected to me, a couple of for rent signs in the upstairs windows of a building that housed a drugstore and a beauty salon. As I went up the stairs, I had a feeling of complete unreality. Surely renting was a complicated business in the case of offices. You did not simply knock on the door of the vacant premises and wait to be admitted. It would have to be done through channels. Also, they would want too much money. As it turned out, I did not even have to knock. A woman came out of one of the empty offices carrying a vacuum cleaner and pushing it with her foot towards the open door across the hall, which evidently led to an apartment in the back of the building. She and her husband lived in this apartment. Their name was Mally, and they owned the building and rented out the offices. The rooms she had just been vacuuming were, she told me, adapted for a dentist office, and so would not interest me, but she would show me the other place. She invited me into her apartment while she stored the vacuum and got her key. Her husband, she said with a sigh I could not interpret, was not at home. Mrs. Malley was a black-haired, delicate-looking woman, perhaps in her early 40s. She had the air of exhaustion that speaks of a life spent in close attention on a man who is sometimes vigorous, grumpy, and dependent. How much of this I saw at first, how much decided on later, is of course impossible to say. But I did think that she would have no children. The stress of her life, whatever it was, did not allow it. And in this, I was not mistaken. The room where I waited was evidently a combination living room and office. The first things I noticed were models of ships sitting on the tables, the windowsills, the television. Where there were no ships, there were potted plants and a clutter of what are sometimes called masculine ornaments. Heads of dead animals, bronze horses, huge ashtrays. On the walls were framed photographs and what might have been diplomas. One photo showed a poodle and a bulldog, dressed in masculine and feminine clothing, in ridiculous poses. But the room was really dominated by a portrait, with its own light and a gilded frame. It was of a good-looking man in middle age, sitting behind a desk, wearing a business suit and looking notably prosperous. In the portrait, there was some evident uneasiness, some lack of faith the man has in this role. Forget the malice. As soon as I saw that office, I wanted it. It was larger than I needed, divided in such a way that it would be suitable for a doctor's office. We had a chiropractor in here, but he left, says Mrs. Malley in her regretful but uninformative way. The walls were cold and empty, white with a little gray. I offered $25 a month. She said she would have to speak to her husband. The next time I came, my offer was accepted, and I met Mr. Malley in the flesh. I explained, as I had already done to his wife, that I did not want to make use of my office during regular business hours, but during the weekends and sometimes in the evening. He asked me what I would use it for, and I told him. He absorbed the information with good humor. "Ah, you're a writer." "Well, yes, I write." "Then we'll do our best to see you're comfortable here," he said. "I'm a great man for hobbies myself. All these ship models, I do them in my free time. They are wonderful for my nerves. People need an occupation for their nerves. I reckon you're the same." "Something the same," I said, relieved that he saw my behavior in this tolerant light. At least he did not ask me, as I half expected, who was looking after the children and did my husband approve. 10 years, maybe 15, had greatly softened and defeated the man in the picture. His hips and legs had now an alarming accumulation of fat, causing him to move slowly and with pain. His predatory expression had collapsed into one of troubling humility and chronic mistrust. I did not look at him. I had not planned, in taking an office, to take on the responsibility of knowing any more human beings. On the weekend, I moved in, without the help of my family. I brought my typewriter and a table and chair. Also, a little wooden table on which I set a small electric stove, a kettle, a jar of instant coffee, a spoon, and a yellow cup. That was all. I looked with satisfaction at the emptiness of my walls, the cheap dignity of my essential equipment, the incredible absence of things to clean, wash, or polish. The vision was not so happy to Mr. Malley. He knocked on my door soon after I was installed and said that he wanted to explain a few things to me about turning off the light in the outside room, which I would not need, about the radiator and its mechanisms. He looked around at everything with gloom and mystification and said it was really uncomfortable place for a lady. "It's perfectly all right for me," I said. Not as directly as I would have liked to, because I always have a tendency to placate people whom I dislike for no good reason, or simply do not want to know. I make elaborate offerings of courtesy sometimes, in the stupid hope that they will go away and leave me alone. What you want is a nice easy chair to sit in, while you're waiting for inspiration to hit. I've got a chair down in the basement, all kinds of stuff down there since my mother passed on last year. I have a carpet you can use. We could get this place fixed up so it'd be a lot more home-like for you. But really, I said, I like it as it is. If you wanted to put some curtains, I paid you for the material. Place needs a touch of color. I'm afraid you'll get sick sitting in here. Oh no, I said, and laughed. I'm sure I won't. It'd be a different story if you was a man. A woman wants things a bit more comfy. So I got up and went to the window and looked down into the empty Sunday street to avoid the accusing vulnerability of his fat face, and I said, with a cold voice that I have practiced many times in my imagination, but rarely used in real life because I am too cowardly, "Mr. Malley, please don't bother me about this anymore. I said it suits me. I have everything I want. Thanks for showing me about the light." The effect was devastating enough to shame me. "I certainly wouldn't dream of bothering you," he said, with precision of speech and distant sadness. "I only made these suggestions for your comfort. Had I realized I was in your way, I would have left some time ago." When he had gone, I felt better, even a little exhilarated at my victory, though still ashamed of how easy it had been. I told myself that he would have had to be discouraged sooner or later. It was better to have it over with at the beginning. The following weekend, he knocked on my door. His expression of humility was exaggerated, almost enough to seem fake. Yet, in another sense, it was real, and I felt unsure of myself. "I won't take up a minute of your time," he said. "I never meant to be a nuisance. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry I offended you last time, and I apologize. Here's a little present, if you will accept it." He was carrying a plant whose name I did not know. It had big, shiny leaves and grew out of a pot, wrapped nicely in pink and silver foil. "There," he said, arranging this plant in a corner of my room. "I don't want any bad feelings with you and me. I'll take the blame." And I thought, maybe she won't accept furnishings, but what's the matter with a nice little plant that'll make things brighter for you? It was not possible for me, at this moment, to tell him that I did not want a plant. I hate houseplants. He told me how to take care of it, how often to water it, and so on. I thanked him. There was nothing else I could do, and I had the unhappy feeling that beneath his offering of apologies and gifts, he was well aware of this and in some way gratified by it. He kept on talking, using the words bad feelings, offended, apologize. I tried once to interrupt with the idea of explaining that this office was an area of my life where good feelings, or bad, did not enter in, that between him and me, in fact, it was not necessary that there be any feelings at all. But I considered this a hopeless task. How could I confront, so openly, this necessity for intimacy? Besides, the plant in its shiny paper had confused me. "How's the writing progressing?" he said, with intentions of putting all our unfortunate differences behind him. "Oh, about as usual." "Well, if you ever run out of things to write about, I got a lot." Pause. "But I guess I'm just eating into your time here." This was a test, and I did not pass it. I smiled, my eyes held by that magnificent plant. I said it was all right. "I was just thinking about the fellow who was here before you, chiropractor. You could have wrote a book about him." I assumed a listening position, my hands no longer touching the keys. If cowardice and insincerity are big vices of mine, Curiosity is certainly another. He had a good practice here. The only trouble was he gave more adjustments than was listed in the book of chiropractic. Oh, he was adjusting right and left. I came in here after he moved out, and what do you think I found? Soundproofing. This whole room was soundproofed to enable him to make his adjustments without disturbing anybody. This very room you're sitting writing your stories in. First we knew of it was a lady knocked on my door one day, wanted me to provide her with a pass key to his office. He'd locked his door against her. I guess he just got tired of treating her particular case. I guess he figured he'd been knocking away at it long enough. Lady well on in years, and him just a young man. He had a nice young wife too, and a couple of the prettiest children you ever would want to see. Filthy some of the things that go on in this world. It took me some time to realize that he told this story not simply as a piece of gossip, but as something a writer would be particularly interested to hear. Writing and lewdness had a vague, delicious connection in his mind. Even this notion, however, seemed so infantile that it struck me as a waste of energy to attack it. I knew now I must avoid hurting him for my own sake, not for his. It had been a great mistake to think that a little aggression would fix things. The next present was a teapot. I insisted that I drank only coffee and told him to give it to his wife. He said that tea was better for the nerves and that he had known right away I was a nervous person, like himself. The teapot was covered with roses and I knew that it was not cheap, in spite of its extreme ugliness. I kept it on my table. I also continued to care for the plant, which grew obscenely in the corner of my room. I could not decide what else to do. He bought me a wastebasket, a fancy one with Chinese mandarins on all 8 sides. He got a cushion for my chair. I despised myself for permitting this. I did not even really pity him. It was just that I could not turn away. I could not turn away from that hunger for attention. And he knew himself my tolerance was bought. In a way, he must have hated me for it. When he lingered in my office now, he told me stories of himself. It occurred to me that he was revealing his life to me in the hope that I would write it down. Of course, he had probably revealed it to lots of people for no particular reason, but in my case, there seemed to be a special, even desperate necessity. His life was a series of calamities, as people's lives often are. He had been let down by people he had trusted, refused help by those he had depended on, betrayed by the very friends to whom he had given kindness and material help. Other people, simple strangers, had taken time to torment him gratuitously, in noble and inventive ways. Moreover, his wife was a difficulty, her health being poor and her temperament unstable. What was he to do? You see how it is, he said, lifting his hands. But I live. He looked to me to say yes. I took to coming up the stairs on tiptoe, trying to turn my key without making a noise. This was foolish, of course, because I could not silence my typewriter. I actually considered writing by hand and wished repeatedly for the evil chiropractor's soundproofing. I told my husband my problem and he said it was no problem at all. Tell him you're busy, he said. As a matter of fact, I did tell him. Every time he came to my door, always armed with a little gift, he asked me how I was, and I said that today I was busy. Ah, then, he said, as he walked through the door. He would not keep me a minute. And all the time, as I have said, he knew what was going on in my mind, how much I wanted him to live. He knew, but did not care. One evening, after I had gone home, I discovered that I had left at the office a letter I had to send in the mail, and so I went back to get it. I saw from the street that the light was on in the room where I worked. Then I saw him sitting at the table. Of course, he came in at night and read what I had written. He heard me at the door, and when I came in, he was picking up my wastebasket, saying he thought he would just order things for me. He went out at once. I did not say anything, but found myself shaking with anger and gratification. I found a cause. It was wonderful. Next time he came to my door, I had locked it on the inside. I continued typing loudly, but not uninterruptedly, so he would know I heard. He called my name, as if I was playing a trick. I bit my lips together not to answer. Unreasonably as ever, guilt came on to me, but I continued typing. That day I saw the earth was dry around the roots of the plant. I let it alone. I was not prepared for what happened next. I found a note taped to my door, which said that Mr. Malley would be thankful if I would go into his office. I went at once to get it over with. He sat at his desk surrounded by obscure evidences of his authority. He looked at me from a distance, wanting to see me in a new and sadly unfavorable light. The embarrassment which he showed seemed not for himself, but me. He started off by saying that he had known, of course, when he took me in, that I was a writer. I didn't let that worry me, though I have heard things about writers and artists and that type of person that didn't strike me as very encouraging. You know the type of thing I mean. This was something new. I could not think what it might lead to. Now you came to me and said, Mr. Malley, I want a place to write in. I believed you. I gave it to you. I didn't ask any question. That's the kind of person I am. But you know, the more I think about it, well, the more I am inclined to wonder. Wonder what? I said. And your own attitude, that hasn't helped me to stop my worry. Locking yourself in and refusing to answer your door. That is not a normal way for a person to behave. Not if they got nothing to hide. No more than it's normal for a young woman, says she has a husband and kids, to spend her time on a typewriter. But I don't think that... He lifted his hand. Now all I ask is that you be open with me. I think I deserve that much. And if you are using that office for any other purpose, or at any other times that you let on, and having your friends or whoever they are up to see you, I don't know what you mean. And another thing, you claim to be a writer. Well, I read quite a bit of material, and I never have seen your name in print. Now, maybe you write under some other name? No, I said. Well, I don't doubt there are writers whose names I haven't heard, he said. Well, let that pass. Just you give me your word of honor there won't be any more lies in that office you occupy. My anger was delayed somehow, blocked off by a stupid incredulity. I only knew enough to get up and walk down the hall and lock the door. I thought, I must go. But after I had sat down in my own room, my work in front of me, I thought again how much I liked this room, how well I worked in it, and I decided not to be forced out. After all, I felt the struggle between us had reached a dead point. I could refuse to open the door, refuse to look at his notes, refuse to speak to him when we met. My rent was paid in advance, and if I left now, it was unlikely that I would get any refund. I decided not to care. Several times after this, I found notes on my door. I intended not to read them, but I always did. His accusations became more specific. He had heard voices in my room. My behavior was disturbing his wife when she tried to take her afternoon nap. I never came in the afternoon, except on weekends. He had found a whiskey bottle in the garbage. I thought a lot about that chiropractor. As the notes turned more virulent, our personal encounters stopped. Gradually, our relationship passed into something that was entirely fantasy. He accused me now, by note, of being intimate with people from Numero Cinq. This was a coffee house in the neighborhood, which I imagine he mentioned for symbolic purposes. I felt that nothing much more would happen now. The notes would continue, their contents becoming possibly more grotesque and so less probable to affect me. He knocked on my door on a Sunday morning, about 11 o'clock. I had just come in and taken my coat off and began making some coffee. This time it was another face, remote and deformed, shining with the emotion of someone who discovered the evidence of sin. I wonder, he said with emotion, if you would mind following me down the hall. I followed him. The light was on in the restroom. The restroom was mine and no one else used it, but he had not given me a key for it and it was always open. He stopped in front of it, pushed back the door, and stood with his eyes completely on. Now, who done that? He said, in a voice of pure sadness. The walls above the toilet and above the sink were covered with drawings and comments of the sort you see sometimes in public restrooms. They were done with a lipstick, as they usually are. Someone vandals came here the night before, I thought. It should have been locked, I said, coolly and firmly, removing myself from the scene. It's quite a mess. It sure is. It's pretty filthy language in my book. Maybe it's just a joke to your friends, but it isn't to me. Not to mention the artwork. That's a nice thing to see when you open a door on your own property in the morning. I said, I believe lipstick will wash off. I'm just glad I didn't have my wife seeing a thing like this. Upsets a woman that's had a nice education. Now, why don't you ask your friends up here to have a party with? I'd like to have a look at the people with that kind of sense of humor. I turned to walk away and he turned heavily in front of me. I don't think there's any question how these decorations found their way onto my walls. If you're trying to say I had anything to do with it, I said, you must be crazy. How did they get there then? Whose restroom is this, eh? Whose? There isn't a key to it. Anybody can come up here and walk in. Maybe some kids off the street came up here and did it last night after I went home. How do I know? It's a shame the way kids get blamed for everything when it's the elders that corrupts them. That's a thing you might do some thinking about, you know? There's laws, obscenity laws. Applies to this sort of thing and literature too, as I believe. This is the first time I ever remember taking deep breaths, consciously, for purposes of self-control. I really wanted to murder him. I remember how soft and easy to hate his face looked, with the eyes almost closed. If this stupid thing had not happened, he would never have won. But he had. He began to say that actually, as a matter of fact, he had not really felt it was the sort of thing I personally would do, more the sort of thing that perhaps certain friends of mine. I got into my room, shut the door. The kettle was making a scary noise. All the water evaporated. I did what I had to do. I put my typewriter and paper on the chair and folded the table. I wished childishly to take some vengeance on the potted plant, which sat in the corner with the flowery teapot, the wastebasket, the cushion. When I was taking things down to the car, Mrs. Malley came. I had seen little of her since that first day. She did not seem upset, but practical and resigned. He's lying down, she said. He's not himself. She carried the bag with the coffee and the mug in it. She was so still I felt my anger leave me, to be replaced by an absorbing depression. I have not yet found another office. I think that I will try again someday, but not yet. I have to wait at least until that picture disappears that I see so clearly in my mind, though I never saw it in reality. Mr. Malley with his brushes and a bucket of soapy water, scrubbing in his clumsy way, his deliberately clumsy way, at the toilet walls, stooping with difficulty, breathing painfully, arranging in his mind the bizarre narrative of yet another betrayal of trust, while I arrange words and think it is my right to be right of him. There you go. So that's The Office by Alice Munro. A lot to dissect, a lot to unpack from here, and we will be doing just that next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. If during your reading you find some other things that are not clear to you, some other vocabulary, some other phrases or grammatical elements, anything that you have a problem with, you can ask about those things on the WhatsApp group. If there's like enough things, maybe we can make a video explaining some of those things. And also during our discussion on Tuesday night, we might take a look at the language and then at the content of the story. So I'll see you around on Tuesday. I hope you enjoy this reading, and well, see you around. Take care.